Irony, a powerful literary and rhetorical device, plays a central role in Afrocomedy, shaping the way comedians engage with their audience while reflecting on the socio-political realities of Africa and the African diaspora. From satirical observations of everyday life to pointed critiques of power structures, irony in Afrocomedy allows for a complex interplay between humor and criticism, offering a unique lens through which to understand African cultures, identities, and struggles. In this piece, we will explore how irony functions within Afrocomedy, its cultural significance, and how it has evolved as an essential element of African humor. What is irony? Before diving into Afrocomedy, it's important to define what irony means in a comedic context. In its most basic form, irony occurs when there is a disparity between expectation and reality. In verbal irony, someone says one thing but means another, while situational irony involves a contradiction between what is expected and what actually happens. In dramatic irony, the audience knows something that the characters do not. All of these types can be used in comedy, but they are particularly effective when employed to highlight the contradictions, injustices, and absurdities in society. In Afrocomedy, irony is not just a tool for eliciting laughter, it is also a means of challenging the status quo, offering social commentary, and navigating complex realities through humor. Afrocomedy, a brief overview. Afrocomedy refers to the comedic traditions that have emerged from African societies and the African diaspora, incorporating local folklore, vernacular languages, social issues, and cultural practices. This genre of comedy spans various media, from stand-up shows and TV skits to social media memes and viral videos. Key to Afrocomedy is its ability to reflect the lived experiences of its audiences, particularly in relation to issues like colonialism, corruption, poverty, and social inequality. In many African countries, humor has historically been used as a form of resistance against oppressive regimes. Comedians often use satire and irony to express discontent with political leaders, societal norms, and colonial legacies, giving voice to the marginalized and the disenfranchised. The role of irony in Afrocomedy. Irony in Afrocomedy can be categorized into several forms, each serving different purposes in the context of African societies. Here are some key ways in which irony manifests in Afrocomedy. Social and political critique. One of the most powerful uses of irony in Afrocomedy is as a tool for social and political critique. Irony allows comedians to expose the contradictions within political and social systems in a way that is both entertaining and thought-provoking. In African contexts, where corruption, authoritarianism, and economic disparity are often pervasive, comedians use irony to highlight the dysfunction of the state and the absurdity of political promises. A well-known Nigerian comedian, for example, may joke about a politician's extravagant promises during an election campaign, only to reveal that those promises are never fulfilled once they are in office. The audience, familiar with the political realities, understands the humor because they see the gap between the politician's rhetoric and the reality of governance. Irony also plays a role in Afrocomedy when it comes to post-colonial issues. Comedians may use ironic statements to point out the lingering effects of colonialism, such as the continued reliance on Western models of development or the remnants of colonial hierarchies in education and government. These ironic jabs allow for a collective laugh at the absurdities of the post-colonial condition, while also critiquing systems that continue to hold back African nations. Cultural identity and the African diaspora. Irony in Afrocomedy also addresses the complexities of African identity, particularly in the diaspora. African comedians often use irony to explore the tension between traditional African values influence of Western culture. In this context, irony becomes a way to navigate the contradictions inherent in being African in a globalized world. For example, African immigrants in the West may use irony to comment on the challenges of balancing their cultural heritage with the expectations of their new surroundings. A common theme might involve the clash between an immigrant's parents' traditional values and the modern, westernized lifestyle of their children. The irony comes into play when the comedian exaggerates both sides, showing how traditional expectations are out of place in a contemporary, cosmopolitan world, while also acknowledging the absurdities of fully embracing Western norms. Humor as survival mechanism. In many African cultures, humor has served as a survival mechanism. In times of hardship, whether under colonial rule, apartheid, or oppressive regimes, people have turned to humor to cope with difficult situations. Irony, as a form of humor, allows people to laugh at their suffering while also recognizing its absurdity. For example, African comedians often use ironic humor to comment on the economic struggles many Africans face, particularly in countries with high levels of poverty and unemployment. By presenting these struggles in an ironic light, the comedian allows the audience to laugh at the situation while simultaneously critiquing the system that perpetuates inequality. Self-deprecation and identity. Irony is also evident in the way Afrocomedy often involves self-deprecation. In self-deprecating humor, the comedian exaggerates or makes fun of their own identity, sometimes playing on stereotypes to highlight their absurdity. African comedians may make jokes about their own accent, the poverty they grew up in, or the perceived backwardness of their country. The irony lies in the fact that these very qualities are often looked down upon by others, yet the comedian turns them into a source of pride and humor. In doing so, Afrocomedy creates space for self-empowerment. It allows the comedian to take ownership of their identity, reframe stereotypes, and challenge negative perceptions in a humorous and ironic way. This subversion of expectations is a powerful tool for affirming African identities and cultures, especially in a world where they have historically been marginalized. Exposing the absurdities of everyday life. Irony in Afrocomedy also helps expose the absurdities and contradictions of everyday life. From the way people interact with one another to the absurdities of daily routines, irony allows comedians to point out the strange and humorous aspects of ordinary situations. For example, in many African cities, the experience of public transportation can be a source of constant frustration. Yet, comedians use irony to exaggerate these frustrations and make them seem absurd, like when a comedian pokes fun at the chaotic nature of a bus ride, where passengers are crammed in like sardines, yet the driver acts as if everything is normal. The irony here highlights the disconnection between the chaos of the situation and the calm demeanor of those involved. Irony is an essential tool in Afrocomedy, providing a means of navigating complex socio-political issues, exploring cultural identities, and reflecting on the contradictions and absurdities of everyday life. It allows African comedians to critique the powers that be, while also offering a space for self-empowerment, resilience, and community solidarity. Whether it's exposing the dysfunction of political systems, highlighting the tensions between tradition and modernity, or simply laughing at the everyday struggles of life, irony remains one of the most important and impactful devices in Afrocomedy today. In the end, Afrocomedy's use of irony does not just make people laugh. It opens up conversations, challenges norms, and invites audiences to reflect on the world around them in a deeper, more critical way. Through the laughter, the audience is invited to question, rethink, and reimagine the realities of African life, both on the continent and in the diaspora.